It happened fast. 1 second. The Humvee rolled steady through the narrow pass. The next, the ground cracked open beneath the lead vehicle in a roar of steel and fire. The blast punched through the silence like a hammer. Then came the screaming metal and sudden weightlessness. Staff Sergeant Casey Miller never even saw the RPG that struck her vehicle. All she remembered was heat, pressure, and the sensation of being thrown sideways into the rocks. She landed hard. A crunch in her ribs, a white flash across her vision, the sharp pop of her left shoulder tearing out of place. Then darkness. For a moment, there was nothing but the ringing in her ears. Dust choked the air. Her eyes burned. Her fingers dug into dirt as she pulled herself behind a jagged boulder. Chest heaving. Her gear was half gone. Her rifle lay 10 feet away. Her left arm wouldn't move right. She used her boot to drag the weapon closer. Teeth clenched as her hand curled around the grip. Gunfire rattled in short bursts nearby. AKs. Voices yelling in a language she recognized but didn't understand. The occasional sharp scream, then silence. Her team wasn't returning fire. She blinked hard, trying to clear her vision. Flames curled from the twisted wreck of the second vehicle, black smoke rising fast. Shadows moved among the bodies. One figure kicked over a fallen soldier. Another raised a weapon. She looked away before the shot. She reached for her radio. Clipped to her vest, but barely hanging on. Cracked casing. Damaged antenna. She adjusted the dial with trembling fingers. Static. Then a voice. Calm. Cold. All units. This is Alpha 6 Actual. Immediate withdrawal to Rally Point Bravo. Enemy forces in battalion strength converging. Extraction assets unable to enter hot zone. Acknowledge. Casey froze. She keyed the mic. Nothing. Her transmitter was dead. But she could still hear Alpha 6 Actual. 4 Kia confirmed. Remaining units withdrawing under fire. Cannot locate Miller. Presumed Kia. Recommend immediate extraction of survivors. Out. Kia. They'd listed her as killed in action. Without checking, without sending anyone to confirm, the radio went quiet. No more voices. No more chance to reach anyone. She was alone, somewhere behind enemy lines. Injured. Cut off. And now officially dead. Casey didn't panic. That part of her training had been drilled too deep to fail now. She inhaled slowly, grounding herself in the pain. Ribs cracked but not broken. Shoulder was dislocated. But she could still move her fingers. She gritted her teeth and drove the joint back into place against the rock. White-hot pain flashed through her skull. She blinked until the world came back into focus. Then she started inventory. Her M4A1 was still operational. 1 full mag. 30 rounds. Another half full. Her Sig Sauer M17 was scratched but solid. 2 loaded mags in her thigh rig. Her IFAK was intact. Combat knife. Water purification tablets. No food. Radio could receive but not transmit. GPS unit was cracked. Compass was gone. No map. No friendly signals. No sign of anyone else breathing. Casey scanned the area. The convoy had been ambushed in a narrow valley. Steep rock walls. Dense trees above. This region wasn't on any map she had studied. No known landmarks. No satellite imagery she could recall. That meant it was either classified terrain or intentionally left blank. She knew what that meant. She was deep in contested territory. She slid low and moved slowly, putting distance between herself and the smoking wreckage. 500 yards. Then 1,000. No sound behind her. No one calling her name. She took cover under a fallen tree, checked her surroundings, and forced herself to breathe. SEER training kicked in. Survival. Evasion. Resistance. Escape. Not theory now. Life. She cataloged everything again in her head, running over her limited supplies like a checklist. She needed water. Shelter. Distance. The sun was dropping fast. By 1900 hours, the shadows had stretched long enough to move. She set her direction west. It was a guess, but a calculated one. If her convoy had been moving northeast, backtracking west gave her the best shot at reaching friendly lines. She would travel by night, rest during daylight, stay off trails, use terrain features for cover. Her father had taught her to read the woods long before the army taught her to fight in them. She didn't feel fear. She felt focus. They said she was dead. Fine. She'd survive long enough to prove them wrong. By the fourth night, the silence started to crack, not with gunfire or helicopters, but with movement that didn't belong to the forest, the sound of boots, the low chatter of men who didn't care how far their voices carried. Casey crouched beneath the brush, eyes still and breathing shallow. As the patrol passed 20 yards from her position, they weren't searching randomly anymore. Their pattern was tighter, methodical. Sweep. Pause. Listen. Move. She watched them fan out, backs exposed, rifles loose at their sides. Not professionals. Militia. Most likely, poor trigger discipline, no radio security. But they had numbers. When they moved on, she followed, quiet as the wind behind them. She kept 100 yards of tree and shadow between her and their rear man. They stopped often, complained loudly, smoked. She learned their rhythm. At 21:15, she heard it. A clipped voice over their radio. Enemy female confirmed alive. High value. Capture only. Reward issued. That was the moment it changed. They knew she was still out here. They knew she wasn't dead. And they didn't want her eliminated. They wanted her taken, interrogated, used. She stared at the patrol from her high ground, and something settled in her chest. A stillness colder than fear. They weren't just hunting her anymore. They were chasing something they didn't understand. She wasn't prey. Not anymore. Casey kept tracking them, adjusting her angle with every turn they made. She noticed they avoided certain areas, gave wide berth to hilltops and tree lines. That wasn't caution. That was coordination. They didn't want to bump into other search teams. They were staying in their own lane. She realized if she stayed close enough to this group, she could avoid the others. Let them walk ahead of her like scouts. If they hit trouble, she'd know. If they changed direction, she'd know why. She wasn't just moving anymore. She was mapping, timing. Every lazy movement they made was data. Every careless radio call, an opportunity. The shift was quiet, internal, not loud or triumphant. Just a flick of the switch. They thought they were closing in. But they'd made a mistake. They'd underestimated what a soldier becomes when she has nothing left to lose. The patrol moved like they weren't being watched. That was their first mistake. Casey tracked them for hours, staying just inside the tree line, always at an angle, always moving when they moved. The forest was thick and uneven, but she used every ridge, every bend, every patch of shade to stay invisible. She didn't want to fight. Not yet. She wanted control. Her first opportunity came just after 10:20 a.m. The rear of the patrol was dragging a single fighter, younger than the rest, carrying a full-frame pack with belts of ammo and spare magazines. He struggled to keep up, fell behind by 30 meters. That was enough. Casey was already in position, prone beneath a fallen log on the slope above. She took the shot from just under 200 yards. One suppressed round through the chest. He collapsed into the brush without a sound. The others didn't notice for almost a full minute. When they did, chase started. Some shouted, others scanned the trees. No one moved smart. No one knew where the shot came from. They searched the tree line in the wrong direction. They stopped marching. Mission post. 3 hours later, another shot. Longer this time. Over 300 yards through shifting light and leaves. She exhaled slow and pressed the trigger. The radio operator dropped. His gear spilled across the trail. Now they were isolated. No comms. No backup. Just a unit moving blind and afraid. That fear was a weapon. Casey let it build. Let them stew in it. They started flinching at wind, looking over shoulders, moving slower, tighter. She studied their habits until she saw the pattern. They always funneled through a rock cut before setting up camp. Narrow trail, limited visibility, no side exits. She waited for them there. As the lead elements entered the choke point, she opened fire. Short bursts, controlled. 2 dropped instantly. The sound echoed in the stone corridor, bouncing back and masking her exact position. The rest broke formation. 1 fired wildly. Another bolted. By the time they scrambled for cover, she was already gone. 5 rounds used. 2 enemies down. The rest scattered, screaming into radios that didn't work. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was controlling the board. The checkpoint sat like a wall between her and freedom, tucked into a narrow mountain pass. It was the only realistic way west. The cliffs on both sides were too steep. The forest behind her too slow. Turning back would cost days she no longer had. She didn't even consider it. 8 men held the position, well armed. Light fortifications. A heavy machine gun set into a sandbag nest. They rotated shifts, stood lazy in the sun, drank from the same water barrel, and never looked past the valley's edge. From a perch on a slope 400 meters out, Casey watched them for 6 hours, flat on her stomach, motionless, counting every movement, mapping their rhythm. She waited for 1,700 hours. That's when it always happened. Old guards left their posts. New ones arrived. For 5 minutes, attention scattered. Voices rose. Rifles slung. Heads turned. That was her window. The machine gunner was first. 1 clean shot through the collar. He dropped sideways into the sandbags. The gun never fired. Before the first yell reached the far end of the camp, her second round punched into the squad leader's leg. He went down screaming, grabbing his thigh. Not dead, but loud, confusing. The rest panicked. Some ducked behind crates. Others fired blind into the trees. None knew where she was. She shifted position fast, crawling downslope to a second hide 20 yards away. She spotted 2 fighters trying to flank right. She hit one in the chest, clipped the other's shoulder. The rest broke. The checkpoint unraveled. Casey waited. 10 minutes, then 15. She scanned the area twice before moving. No return fire. No movement. Just echo and smoke. She moved quickly across the pass, keeping low. Rifle ready. She stripped the bodies of gear, took 2 loaded mags, a pouch of rations, a half-full canteen. Then she found it. An enemy radio. Still warm. Still working. She didn't test it yet. Not here. This ground wouldn't stay quiet for long. She slipped into the rocks on the far side of the pass, her breath steady, her limbs shaking from adrenaline, not fear. She hadn't just gotten through. She'd taken the fight to them, on her terms, and she'd won. She hiked 2 more clicks before stopping. The rocks gave way to a shallow rise, just enough to give her elevation and a 360-degree view. It wasn't perfect, but it would do. She dug into the brush, laying belly down in the dirt. Hands tight around the enemy radio she'd pulled from the checkpoint. The battery light was green, still had juice. She attached her earpiece, steadied her breath, and started scanning frequencies. Static, more static. Then a burst of chatter, foreign, not friendly. She moved past it. Next band, dead silence. Then, finally, a signal pinged back. Faint, English, automated beacon. It was enough. She keyed the mic. Calm, controlled. The way she'd practiced 100 times. This is Viper 2-3 actual. Staff Sergeant Casey Miller. Alive. Mobile. operating in hostile territory. Grid unknown. Las contacte 11 days ago. Convoy destroyed. Presumed quilla. Negative. I am active and evading. Request immediate support or extraction. Repeat. Viper 2-3 actual, transmitting in the blind. Break. I am armed. Low on supplies. And under pursuit by battalion-level elements. Will continue to move west toward potential friendly AO. She paused. Changed frequency. Repeated the message. Once, then again, on a third band. The moment she finished, she powered down the device, popped the battery, and buried the unit beneath a flat stone. If anyone was tracking the signal, they'd get nothing useful. Then she climbed, found a ridge with exposed rock. No trees overhead. She gathered stones. Hands scraped raw. Knees bruised. Took nearly an hour to shape the message. 3 large letters. A time. A grid. KV8. 1-3. 2-2-0-0. If anyone was watching from above, they'd see it. If no one was, well, she wasn't ready to accept that. The sun had started its descent. By then, shadows stretched long across the valley. She sat with her back against the ridge, knees pulled up, fingers wrapped around the M17 resting on her thigh. She was hungry, weak, outnumbered. But she'd just called the ghosts. The men in black, who never left one behind. Now she waited, not because she believed someone was coming, but because she'd done her part. If rescue came, they'd find her ready. And if it didn't, she'd keep moving. She hadn't survived this long just to sit still. The signal came in just after 14:30. Fragmented. No authentication code. But the call sign was right. The voice was steady, and everything she said matched the chaos they'd been tracking for days. Supply convoys ambushed, patrols scattered, checkpoints abandoned, all in one sector, one operator. The colonel read the transcript twice. Then he gave the order. 2 MH-60 Blackhawks lifted off after nightfall, flying low. Nap of the earth, skimming just above treetops to stay off radar. Inside, a Delta Force rescue team prepped in silence. No one said much. They all knew who they were looking for. At exactly 2200 hours, the lead pilot called eyes on the ridge. They spotted the stone grid coordinates first, then movement. The infrared feed showed a single figure in a defensive position on high ground. Around here, 6 bodies. The heat signatures told the story. Fresh kills, scattered weapons. 1 knife still buried in a fallen fighter's chest. Then her voice came over the open channel. Calm. Direct. Landing zone is cold. Immediate threats eliminated. Recommend rapid extraction. Enemy QRF possible within 10 mics. The Black Hawks flared over the ridge, rotors kicking up dust and ash. As the Delta team approached, they expected to find someone broken, someone crawling, someone barely hanging on. What they saw was a soldier standing tall, rifle low ready, scanning the tree line. Her uniform was torn, face smudged with dirt and blood. One arm still wrapped from an old field dressing, but her eyes were sharp, her breathing was calm. The team leader stepped forward and said what every operator trains their whole life to say. We're here to bring you home. Casey let the muzzle of her rifle drop. Took you long enough. I've been making enough noise. Figured someone would notice. They didn't laugh. Not then. They just nodded. Because they understood. She hadn't been rescued. She had arranged her own recovery, held the line, marked the time, picked the terrain. As they loaded onto the bird, one of the medics moved to check her wounds. She waved him off. Later. We move now. They lifted into the night. Behind them, the valley disappeared into darkness. She was going home. Not as a survivor. As the one who never stopped fighting. The debrief took hours. Senior officers filled a room at the forward operating base, watching drone footage, scanning enemy reports, listening to her speak in that same calm, measured voice she'd used over the radio. They didn't interrupt much. They just let her lay it all out. What she'd seen, where she moved, how she picked them apart. By the end, the numbers painted their own story. 23 enemy fighters neutralized, 3 supply convoys destroyed or delayed, communications disrupted across multiple sectors, a full battalion's worth of manpower diverted to hunt a single operator who was never supposed to be alive. And she'd done it all with fractured ribs, a dislocated shoulder, 2 mags, and a knife. Command understood then. This wasn't just a survival story. It was a strategic reversal. What started as a disaster ended in dominance. She turned fear into leverage, turned terrain into control, turned the silence of being left behind into an echo the enemy couldn't ignore. Weeks later, after she recovered, the offer came in. Special Reconnaissance Unit. Black side of the board. No uniform. No rank on paper. Just missions where failure meant erasure. She said yes. But not because of glory, not because of medals. She said yes, because now she knew what mattered. What you do when no one's coming. Years passed. She didn't tell the story often, but others did. And one afternoon, in the still air of a training compound back home, a young operator in her class finally asked, "Is it true that you took down a checkpoint with 4 rounds and a rock?" She smirked. 5 rounds. No rock. But that's not the part you need to remember. He waited. Being left behind doesn't mean you give up. It means you get sharper, meaner. You become the thing they're not ready for. That night, she walked the range alone. Quiet steps, eyes scanning the dark. And a mile away, in a war room lit by monitors and coffee steam, a new doctrine sat on the wall, operating independently in denied territory, prioritizing mindset over gear. It was called the Miller Protocol. And every recruit who saw those words understood. This wasn't just about tactics. It was about never letting someone else decide when your story ends.